During World War II, Japanese troops under the command of the Imperial family and the legendary General Yamashita are said to have buried a fortune in treasure in the Philippines. The story goes that it was looted during the Japanese march across Asia. Some say it was the largest hoard in history. Today, treasure hunters comb the islands, searching for the fabled Yamashita's gold.
The quantities that people talk about over here, I mean, are mind-boggling. You're talking not tons, but hundreds of tons. Gold.
You're chasing something that's a real dream. There's romance, adventure, excitement, and it allows grown men to be little boys again.
I think it's almost a disease, this treasure hunting syndrome, that drives people to lose reason, and you have to really sit back and say, now, wait a minute.
Well, it's a chance to, get incredibly rich real quick. Maybe 10 feet down, there's, $300 or $400 million in metal somewhere. And if you dwell on that and you start thinking about it, you get really, really odd-looking people. They get this thought and their eyes go glassy and they start smiling and just thinking about what's going to happen once they find this gold. And there, another guy's down with gold fever.
For treasure hunters, Yamashita's gold represents the ultimate dream of fabulous wealth. But there's another version of the story, how the mythology of the treasure has been exploited. Filipino dictator Ferdinand Marcos, some say, used the myth of Yamashita's gold to hide his theft of the Philippines' own resources. His widow is unrepentant.
Tell the whole world, Marcos is the biggest thief. Marcos is the biggest criminal. Marcos is this. Then afterwards, they will look for evidence. To this day, thanks God, they've found none.
Rumors of a vast treasure left by the Japanese began to sweep the Philippines shortly after the war. The rumors have never died away. Books and internet websites have helped to spread the story of Yamashita's gold. Its most dramatic version claims that during the war, the Japanese Imperial family masterminded an operation to loot the territories the Japanese had conquered, and that towards the end of the war, they buried hundreds of tons of stolen gold in sites throughout the Philippines. Sterling Seagrave, an American author, has spent a couple of decades investigating Yamashita's gold.
We know that there were 175 imperial treasure sites, and these sites have marked on them the quantity of gold that was hidden in each vault. They had hidden $100 billion, 1945 dollars worth of treasure in the Philippines.
Some critics regard Seagrave's theories as speculation, but their origins unquestionably lie in historical fact: Japan's conquest and exploitation of Asia. From the early 1930s onwards, Japanese forces marched through Asia, spreading down from Manchuria through China to Southeast Asia and on to the archipelagos of the Southern Pacific. And as they advanced, they looted, systematically and ruthlessly. Initially, much of the war loot was returned to Japan. Then came Pearl Harbor. Within months, the war turned against Japan, and US naval forces started to close off the sea routes to the home islands. Seagrave argues that there's evidence showing that Japanese imperial princes buried the treasure in the Philippines, one of the main staging posts within the orbit of Japan's conquests. In 1945, the story goes on, the Japanese faced defeat at the hands of the Americans. So the imperial family, now working with General Yamashita, who'd been made commander of Japanese forces in the Philippines, buried the last troves of treasure here.
There were all these rumors that there was treasure concealed here. If, let's say, one native of the place finds one drum full of pre-war Philippine coins, the story can grow. As it goes on, people are very secretive about it, so it goes by word of mouth. And as it goes by word of mouth, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. What's 1 drum becomes 10 drums, and what's 1,000 pesos becomes 1,000,000 pesos by the time it reaches Manila.
There's a lot of evidence that the Japanese buried some occupation valuables behind their lines. But this is very different from the full-blown Yamashita legend. Some say the Yamashita treasure's been recovered, but no one knows for certain. Amidst all the doubts, one name does crop up again and again, the former dictator of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos. Some believe he was the biggest and most successful treasure hunter of them all. For over 2 decades, Marcos ruled his country like a gangster. He was widely accused of bribery, corruption, and the torture and murder of political opponents. Marcos also built a vast personal fortune, much of it in gold. No one knows how much it was, but it's estimated to have been billions of dollars. Marcos's widow says that her late husband was always obsessed with gold.
He had a fascination with gold even before the war and even before he finished college in 1939. And he was already trading, working with gold mines. He was truly fascinated with gold because he thought gold was virtue, like virtue.
Ferdinand Marcos, like many Filipinos, was fascinated by legends of Yamashita's gold. In the late 60s, rumours began to circulate that Marcos had found the treasure, rumours that Marcos himself encouraged.
Well, Marcos started out with less than $60,000 in assets according to his tax returns when he took over as president in 1966. In 1970, it became apparent he was making a lot more money than his presidential salary. And he called in the local press and said, "Do you know how I made my pile, boys? I found the treasure of Yamashita."
Marcos claimed that he'd first got hold of maps to the Yamashita treasure as a guerrilla fighting the Japanese in the northern Philippines. Few believed him later on when he and his wife Imelda said that he'd actually found Yamashita's gold. Today she tells a different tale.
Sometimes in levity he would say, "Oh, maybe, where did you get his money, you know?" Because maybe I got in, you know, Yamashita gold because they surrendered. But in truth and in fact, it couldn't have been that because there was no such thing.
But in 1971 came a discovery that indelibly linked Marcos's name with Yamashita's gold and appeared to provide concrete proof of the existence of the treasure itself.
They found a golden Buddha at 3 feet. The height is 3 feet and the weight is 1 ton.
Henry's father, Rogelio Rojas, a Filipino locksmith and treasure hunter, claimed to have found a solid gold Buddha in a tunnel behind a hospital in the former Japanese stronghold of Baguio. He believed the Buddha was part of Yamashita's private hoard. For a quarter of a century, treasure hunters had been searching for the gold. Now, here was a startling piece of evidence for the authenticity of the Yamashita's gold story. Rojas said that he'd been given a map by a former Japanese officer which showed the whereabouts of the Buddha.
We know there's Buddha there because of the map, but To locate the entrance is really very hard. It took us 17 days because it is already blasted. So that is how we entered we found the entrance of the tunnel.
And you can remove the head of the golden Buddha, and there is a diamond inside, more or less 2 cups of diamond, a big diamond.
25 years after these photographs were taken, an American court awarded one of the largest judgments in legal history to the Rojas family against the heirs of the dictator Marcos, $22 billion. As Rojas told it, shortly after he discovered the Buddha, agents of Marcos raided his home and confiscated it. A media outcry ensued. 2 weeks later, the Buddha was returned.
After 9 days, when they raided the house, they surrendered, the military raided her house. They surrendered the Buddha at the Baguio City Hall, but it's fake, a fake Buddha.
Rojas alleged a switch. This Buddha was made of bronze and its head did not detach. Rojas was arrested. Under duress, he retracted his protest. It was only 20 years later, after Marcos's fall from power, that Rojas felt safe enough to pursue the former president in court. He claimed Marcos still had the original gold Buddha and sued him for its return. Arlene Friedman, an American private investigator, was hired by Rojas's lawyers. Over 6 years, she interviewed some 350 people associated with the Golden Buddha case, and she found a key witness. He'd seen the Buddha just after it had been discovered.
So the first person I located was Kenneth Cheatham, who was in the military at the time, U.S. military. He was stationed in the Philippines, and he was a treasure hunter. And Roger's story hit the press, and so Kenneth Cheatham went over to Roger's house and took photographs of Roger and the Buddha.
Yamashita's gold supporters used Cheatham's photographs to prove the authenticity of the Golden Buddha.
And this establishes beyond doubt that the Buddha was real, that Roxas had it, and that this American intelligence officer was sitting there with him.
But Cheatham himself says the photographs do not tell the whole story.
Roger's brother wanted to show us where someone had drilled a hole in the bottom of it to test the metal. And so it took 3 of us to turn the Buddha over and lay it down. And so he showed us where this hole was and said that it took an hour for somebody to drill a hole that wasn't a 1/4 inch deep. So we knew that it was out of a very, very tough metal.
Gold is a soft metal. If Cheatham's recollection of the depth of the hole is correct, the Buddha could not have been gold.
In no way was it gold. To me, it was silver all over, sort of had a dull silver finish.
Cheatham, however, was not called to testify on this point in court. Surprisingly, a member of Rojas's own family agrees with Cheatham. Rojas's brother, Jose, says that the Buddha wasn't gold and that there were no diamonds in the neck. When we approached Jose for an interview, he was reluctant to talk, at least without a substantial payment.
Go to Quezon City and make another Buddha.
In turn, associates of the late Rogelio Rojas maintain that Jose is in the pay of Imelda Marcos. They claim nothing he says can be trusted.
It's really unfair for him as brother to talk like that. And we found out later that there's something wrong. There's an arrangement with the First Lady and Jose Rojas. You see, just to denounce that there's no really real golden Buddha.
But some say Umali himself isn't completely reliable. They point out that he's part of the group that supposedly discovered the Buddha. He has an interest in maintaining its authenticity. In this photograph, he's seen with what appears to be the original Buddha Rojas said he found. In this one, he's seen with the Buddha that was returned by Marcos's men. But have the photos been tampered with? Extraordinarily, the Buddha changes in the photo, but Umali's expression and body position remain exactly the same. The Golden Buddha case, like the whole Yamashita mythology, is a shady world of charge and countercharge, of bluff and double bluff. Despite the doubts and rumours, Rojas always maintained that his Buddha was made of gold and that Marcos stole it. Just before Rojas was due to fly to Hawaii to give evidence against Marcos, he died. His friends and family claim he was murdered, poisoned by Marcos.
Imelda Marcos and my father, he eat soup. After 4 months, my father's here in the Philippines, then it's always vomiting. He died at Manila.
How did he die?
Poison.
But the Rojas case was about to take a dramatic twist. A witness was produced who claimed he'd seen a Buddha identical to Rojas's in Marcos's now abandoned summer palace in the Philippines. A witness who helped swing the trial the Rojas's way, and who may be the key to the truth about Yamashita's gold. The Golden Buddha returned by Marcos's men is held today in a courtroom in Baguio in the northern Philippines. In the case brought by Rogelio Rojas against the Marcoses in the American courts, Rojas's lawyers had to prove that this was not the original Buddha, that the original Buddha, found by their client, was made of gold, and that former Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos had stolen it. As part of their case, they brought forward a treasure hunter named Robert Curtis. If you want to get to the truth about Yamashita's gold, you're going to come across the name of Curtis, an ex-auto salesman who started working in the precious metals business in the 1970s. Curtis's story is that in 1975, he saw a golden Buddha at Marcos's now abandoned summer palace, a claim he repeated under oath to lawyers for Rojas.
While you were there at the summer palace, did you see any gold?
Yes.
Where, in what form was the gold?
Well, one was a Buddha and the other were bars.
And where did you see a Buddha?
In his office.
That photograph contains a picture of two people and a picture of a Buddha with some rope around it. Do you recognize the Buddha in that photograph?
That's the Buddha that I saw on the floor of the summer palace. There's no question. There could only be one Buddha like that.
Curtis's testimony supported other evidence in the case for the Rojases. And in August of 1996, a court in Hawaii awarded Rojas's heirs one of the biggest damages judgments in legal history, $22 billion. The award infuriated the Marcos family. Imelda Marcos asks why the Buddha's country of origin hasn't demanded its return if it's so valuable.
After saying that we stole this Buddha, and there is no community in the world, there is no country in the world that is claiming this Buddha.
The Rojas family hasn't collected a penny from the Marcoses. The $22 billion judgment has been massively reduced on appeal. The case continues. For the Rojases, the Buddha has been a curse.
Henry, you seem quite nervous down here.
Yeah.
You just tell me why.
Because I'm very afraid to see the others people, to go here and maybe I'm so nervous until now.
Is it still dangerous for you?
Yes, sir.
Why?
I don't like to die on the I'm afraid to the Marcos group and also the government.
Marcos was a villain. The list of people he harmed is a long one. Another who says he's owed money by the Marcos family is Robert Curtis. He says that Marcos had acquired a fortune in gold and that the dictator hired him to find more.
During this meeting with the president, he was trying to eliminate any doubts that I had. So the purpose of the trip was to show me gold. He asked General Vera to take me downstairs and show me some gold that was recovered from one of his sites. Well, there was a hallway and some guards at a door, which they opened up, and I went in, and there were gold stacked from floor to ceiling. I was amazed that they could get that much gold stacked up that high.
Curtis says that Marcos and the treasure hunters had acquired maps to 172 Japanese burial sites. The story of where these maps came from and how Marcos's group acquired them is a romantic one. The version offered by Curtis and others is that the maps were left with a Filipino, Ben Valmores, at the end of the war. According to this story, Valmores had served as valet to the Japanese officer responsible for the treasure burials, Prince Takeda. Valmores is the key eyewitness.
He visited the treasure sites. He went with his prince during the excavation, during the loading of the treasure into the vaults, and then during the final inventories before the vaults were sealed. Toward the end of the war, he went with Prince Takeda up to the northern end where they rendezvoused with a Japanese submarine, and it was arranged for Prince Takeda to be smuggled out of the Philippines to Japan. He turned to Ben and he left his satchel full of original treasure maps with Ben, figuring that if the submarine were sunk on its way back to Japan, Ben would obligate himself to turn the satchel over to Takeda's family after the war.
Hard evidence for Valmores' story is sparse. He no longer has the artifacts allegedly left him by the prince. He says that years of wear and tear destroyed the uniform and sword, and that the maps were taken from him by none other than Ferdinand Marcos. Marcos, he says, learnt of the existence of the maps. He dispatched one of his top treasure hunters, a Colonel Villacrucis, to get hold of them.
Colonel Villacrucis see the map because he's the one who break the lock. And he says to me, Ben, this is a map of treasure. So I was surprised when he says that is a map of treasure. So I said, no, might be, I don't know.
The Labour Group, it said, was the name of Marcos's treasure hunting team. It apparently included Villacrucis and Valmores. Robert Curtis says that he was asked to join the group. His tasks, to decode the Japanese maps and to find the gold. Then he says he had to use his metallurgical knowledge to re-smelt the gold so that its origins were disguised.
Curtis was a success. He reverse engineered about 8 sites, and one of them, the most celebrated, was called Teresa. Teresa 2, actually, because there are 4 different Teresa sites on the same odd-shaped Sugarloaf Mountain.
Curtis says that the Teresa site was selected as the first test of his engineering skills. Beneath it lay an underground complex built by slave labour. The Valmores maps indicated it held army trucks filled with bullion, solid gold Buddhas and precious gems. 60 feet down, Curtis claims they hit a Japanese booby trap. Curtis says Marcos's troops cleared the site as a safety measure, but he was never allowed to return. He admits that he never saw one gold bar removed from the ground. Shortly after, he says he was forced to leave the Philippines in fear of his life.
On July 5th, 1975, Colonel Yamashita picked me up to take me to see General Guerrilla and President Marcos, but instead took me to the U.S. military cemetery in Fort Bonifacio, where I was led to a group of rhododendron bushes, and I saw this hole in the ground, big enough to sit my body in, and Colonel Yamashita put a .45 behind my ear and told me, "We're good friends, but I'm sorry I have to do this."
Obviously, you're still here, so I assume the gun was not fired.
Well, I'm a good talker.
Were you able to talk your way out of it?
Yes.
And
amazingly, I did.
Did you then decide it was time to leave the Philippines?
Wouldn't you?
Yes.
At that point, Marcos came in with his soldiers, and they removed only the gold that they found in the back of 8 or 9 army trucks that were in one of the tunnels. The amount of gold Marcos recovered was $9 billion worth of gold in 1975 values. After that, gold prices went way up.
Back in the US, Robert Curtis went public with his story. It was embarrassing for the Marcos regime and excited huge interest among treasure hunters. Curtis claimed that before leaving the Philippines, he'd photographed and then burnt the original treasure maps which had been in his possession. He was now the key source of information about the supposed 172 sites. Few questioned his story. One of those who went along with Curtis was a much decorated World War II hero, Major General John Singlaub. Extraordinarily, Singlaub thought it would be a good idea not just to hunt for the gold, but to use it to help fund a guerrilla war supported by right-wing forces in the States.
I was at the time very actively engaged in supporting the Nicaraguan resistance. I was raising money for that purpose. Raising money in the United States had its limits as far as support to a resistance movement. I could use it for humanitarian aid, but for the military aid, I needed to raise the money outside of the country to comply with our laws, the Neutrality Act. And I thought it sounded like a good source of revenue if it really was legitimate.
Singlaub's group explored dozens of potential treasure sites, among them the fortress island of Corregidor in Manila Bay, which had been occupied by the Japanese in World War II.
There were a variety of sites that were listed among the 172 or whatever the number was of sites that were supposedly used by the Japanese for the burial of this treasure. Not all of it was gold bullion, but most of it was.
Curtis indicated that gold had been buried in a major tunnel complex built by American forces before the Second World War.
The story goes that the Japanese decided to put a significant deposit in some of those underground tunnels. It would be easy to seal them up with minimum amount of work and observation. And I suspect that's the reason why they selected it.
Singlaub's group failed to strike gold or anything else except tons of dirt. Far from making money, they ran out of it. The Nicaraguan Contras had to fight on without their help. But others were ready to take their place in the queue.
Curtis knew of one site. All he needed was a sledgehammer to knock through one wall, and there was approximately $1 billion in treasure. And that was Fort Santiago.
Ex-Green Beret Charles McDougald, an acquaintance of Singlaub, was the next to approach Curtis. McDougald, of course, hoped Curtis's maps would help make him rich. But he was also a close friend of some important Filipino figures. Part of his pitch was that the gold would help bail out the Filipino economy. He started digging in the ancient Fort Santiago, which had been used by the Japanese as a wartime facility.
So we went there, set up, all set to knock through this wall. We knocked through it, and we found ourselves facing, I think, a 14-foot square room with a 30-foot ceiling filled with earth. So there we were tunneling in the middle of this fort, trying to find where this treasure was, supposedly just on the other side of the wall. And that we would be digging all night and close up at dawn and go home.
The treasure hunt turned into a public relations disaster when 2 Filipino workers were killed in a cave-in.
About 2 weeks into the dig, I think it was February 22nd, 1988, there was a cave-in that killed 2 of our men. And we had to shut down the site and, of course, go in and get the bodies. As a result, we had to go public and announce that we were digging for gold there.
A Philippine Senate hearing was set up and the project shut down. No treasure was ever found. Doubts about Curtis were now growing in the Philippines.
You admitted that you have been the subject of a criminal case in the state of Nevada.
Yes,
is this correct?
That is correct.
Will you name the case charged against you?
It was wire fraud. I respectfully submit, Mr. Chairman, that any inquiry into the past history of my client would not be material. It would just be dragging the name of my client, I do not know for what purpose.
Curtis was actually the leader of the group, and we didn't know at the time why he was scared to death of all this going on. And later we found out he was worried that they were going to find out about his past, that he had conned some people and that he had been sued in court, I think twice.
Gary Thompson spent over 2 years investigating the Curtis story in the early 90s.
From the first day, it sounded too incredible to believe, but he was able to produce documents that had some apparent validity to them, and it was an intriguing story. And any journalist likes to tell stories and likes to get to the truth of a mystery, and what we wanted to do was see where's the real truth in this story.
Over time, Thompson grew increasingly skeptical of most of Curtis's stories. During the course of his research, he discovered that Curtis had been convicted in a number of gold-related fraud cases.
Most of what he told us about himself was fabricated. He claimed that he invented the MasterCard, the bank credit cards. He claims that he was able to take plain dirt and extract gold from it. None of that was true. So there were a number of things about Curtis that raised serious concerns.
The treasure hunters had placed great faith in Curtis. As they worked with him, they began to question their reliance on his stories.
In my discussions with him, I would find what I considered gaps in his knowledge, or his story didn't always match the story that he had given someone else, and he did not have a good explanation for that.
Every bit of the Lieber Group story that I checked out didn't check out. They claim the maps were written in 2,000-year-old Japanese script. Well, there's no such thing. and on like that. Every claim they presented, I tried to check out, and I couldn't. I'm convinced there was a treasure there. I'm not convinced at all that there were exactly 172 sites, or that they even had that many maps to back it up. And then we dug for 10 months, and we spent $900,000, and we never found a thing.
Yamashita's gold has attracted countless treasure seekers with the promise of immense wealth. It's doubtful that any have found it. Yet such is the lure of the gold that many still believe a major discovery lies tantalizingly just around the corner. In the mountains of the northern Philippines, the gold legends are handed down from generation to generation.
Our parents, they took history then that there's some gold here in Philippines, here, this side, mostly here in Bambang.
This place?
Yeah.
What are you looking for down there?
The Buddha.
Like a gold Buddha?
I don't know if Buddha or gold bars.
The hopes of treasure hunters are fueled from time to time by rumours of major discoveries made somewhere in the islands. All too often these stories prove to be a disappointment. Sunio Matsuzaki is a former Japanese TV producer and treasure hunter based in the Philippines. He says that there are crime syndicates in the Philippines which con treasure hunters by getting them to buy fake gold bars.
There's one particularly large syndicate whose boss I've been to talk to a number of times. That boss claims he's fooled over 2,000 Japanese. This syndicate has made so much money that they can afford to make real gold bars. They're made in the same molds as the fake bars, and then these real gold bars are mixed in with the fake ones. These gold bars are the ones they offer for testing. Then once they've got their money, they switch the real bars for fake ones. So there are elements who are making large quantities of fake gold in order to fool people.
From gold bars to treasure maps, what little proof there is of the existence of Yamashita's gold is tainted by doubt.
But those maps that I have seen are generally what I would call fake maps. Fake in the sense that they were not done by Japanese. Also, some of the maps I've seen have the character gold very, very prominently displayed. And one who is trying to conceal gold is going to probably use another character as a secret symbol for gold. But why would you put on a map a character which says gold, and this is where the gold is, and I have arrows pointing to that?
The documentary evidence is not conclusive. Practically anything can be bought in the back streets of Manila, including false birth and death certificates, bank statements, and government documents.
I think there's a cottage industry in the Philippines to print maps, to manufacture documents about gold deals. And the difficulty is in wading through all of these phony documents to find out which ones are real. I think one of the things that you have to use when you're looking at this is common sense. When you see documents relating to a gold deal for 100,000 tons of gold, that's not a realistic deal.
What then is the truth about Yamashita's gold? There's no conclusive proof that the story of the treasure is true. Whatever gold bullion Japan did amass during its march across Asia, its scale may have been exaggerated, and it's probable that it was, in any case, long ago dispersed into the Japanese economy. The story of Yamashita's gold hovers somewhere in the triangle between history, myth, and deception. And some believe the biggest Yamashita deception of all may have been perpetrated by Ferdinand Marcos himself.
was all this talk about this wealth that Marcos had accumulated. And he kept on saying that this was money that he had accumulated after finding the Yamashita treasure. But very few people believed that story, and many people still believe today that this was actually a kind of camouflage, a smokescreen.
After the fall of Marcos, reporter Scott Malone spent 2 years looking into his alleged fortune, said to be worth billions. Most of this fortune is alleged to have come from bribes, corruption and kickbacks. But Malone concluded that there was another possible explanation for much of Marcos's wealth.
What it appeared that Marcos had done was melted down, resmelted Philippine Central Bank gold and turned it into Yamashita treasure. Marcos took the smelting technology from his American partners that he'd booted out, used his Filipino military treasure hunters to sell gold. It was said to be in 75-kilogram bars. The most consistent story of people who actually worked for Marcos, like Colonel Villacrucis and General Ferreira, was that they were marked Sumatra, stamped Sumatra in AAA.
The Philippines is a gold-producing country, one of the largest in Asia. Malone's investigations revealed that in 1978, at the height of Marcos's power, all the Philippine gold mines were forced to sell their gold to the new central bank refinery Marcos had built. Malone had come across one possible example of how Marcos may have built his huge fortune. He found documents showing that between 1978 and 1984, 62 tons of gold were reportedly sent by mining operations for processing at the central bank refinery. But central bank figures showed they received only 55 tons. 7 tons were mysteriously unaccounted for. 7 tons, worth $58.6 million at current prices.
Marcos did indeed meet with the treasure hunters, the Philippine treasure hunters, the Americans, the smelters, and then he more or less turned it into a double-edged cover story. He encouraged the rumors of his incredible treasure to explain his own wealth, which appeared to be mostly stolen from the Philippine economy, Philippine government agencies, Filipino people. In reviewing all my files and documents and memos, I found only one person in a 2-year investigation that ever saw one actual alleged bar of gold. Other than that, I found hard evidence, documentary evidence of various people trying to sell gold, smelt gold, broker gold, loan gold, swap gold, and ship gold. But all that gold, almost to a T, the only real gold I ever found came from the central bank in one form or another, and not the so-called treasure of Yamashita.
Like gold itself, the story of Yamashita's treasure refuses to be tarnished. Even those who doubt most of the evidence still find it hard to let it go entirely.
I believe that the truth underlying the story was that there was gold looted by the Japanese and that some of it was buried in the Philippines. But I think if you think about this logically, if you were the Japanese, would you bury this great hoard of gold, this alleged hoard of gold, in 172 sites around the Philippines? No, you try and concentrate it in as few locales as possible, in as secure an area as possible, and as soon as possible after the end of the war, you would come back and make recoveries.
It takes a lot of rejection of the natural greed desire to reject the concept of digging for treasure. My personal gut feeling is that there was treasure there. If it's a scam, it's very well thought out and very well choreographed.
It's a wonderful, wonderful idea that you are involved in the greatest treasure hunt in the world. I got very hooked on it, I really did, until I started looking at it rationally. It's a wonderful saga. It's Indiana Jones. You can sit in your armchair and say, I have a piece of an Indiana Jones saga. You have the Philippine community who is making an enormous amount of money by people going over there and looking for this treasure. They're hiring Filipino workers. This is a country that's starving to death. Investors' money is being spent in the Philippines. This behooves them to keep the story going.
lot of us have gone over there and spent a lot of money looking for treasure. And I do not blame the Philippines one bit. I enjoyed myself over there. But we've contributed a lot to the economy. Now, we've dug a lot of holes, and I apologize for that. But we tried not to dig too many. Put a lot of people on the payroll, and we've left a lot of dollars over there. There's the treasure right there, all the treasure hunters that leave the dollars.